I've decided to start a new life without you." The words hung in the air like a sudden storm, sharp and impossible to ignore, in the upscale restaurant where we had gathered to celebrate my daughter's college graduation. Gregory, my husband of 28 years, stood holding his champagne glass high, as if he were still in the middle of a toast, but the words he had just spoken completely replaced the celebration he was supposed to be leading. The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations froze mid-sentence. 50 pairs of eyes shifted nervously between Gregory and me, waiting, expecting, perhaps even hoping for tears, shouting, or the kind of dramatic scene movies always show in moments like this. But I did none of that. I smiled. Calmly, quietly, I said, "Congratulations on your honesty. My name is Bianca Caldwell. I am 54 years old, and until this moment, I had been living the life of the devoted wife and mother perfectly. I had put aside my own dreams to support Gregory through 3 different business ventures, 2 major career changes, and countless finding himself phases. I had raised our brilliant daughter, Amelia, who now sat beside me, her graduation cap slightly askew, her eyes wide and frozen in disbelief. From the corner of my eye, I saw Cassandra Wells, Gregory's much younger girlfriend. She was sitting at the back table with people I had considered friends for decades, friends who, it seemed, had known about the affair but had never thought to tell me. Cassandra, who had attended our Christmas parties, who had once called me for advice about her career, was shifting uncomfortably in her seat, suddenly very aware that her presence was now impossible to ignore. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a sealed cream-colored envelope. With calm precision, I placed it beside Gregory's plate. "What's this?" he asked, his triumphant expression flickering, uncertainty creeping in. "Something for you to read later," I said, keeping my voice steady, almost gentle. I turned to Amelia, whose face had gone pale, and I kissed her cheek. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. Today is still about you. This day is yours, not his." Then I stood, smoothing the front of my dress, and addressed our stunned guests. "Please enjoy your meal. I hope you all have a lovely afternoon." I walked out of the restaurant slowly, deliberately, my head held high. 50 pairs of eyes followed me as I moved, full of shock and curiosity, watching every step. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind me, cutting off the rising murmurs, leaving only the echo of my calm confidence behind. Outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. The weight of years of loyalty, patience, and hidden hurt seemed to lift with each step I took. In that moment, I felt a clarity I had never known. My life, my dignity, and my daughter's happiness were still mine, and no one could take that away. Outside, the heavy Augusta summer heat hit me like a wall. The air was thick, sticky, and almost suffocating, but I welcomed it. For the first time in years, I felt free. I could breathe deeply, without the weight of years of hidden resentment pressing on my chest. Behind me, the restaurant door swung open with a loud creak and then slammed shut, and I heard Gregory's voice, no longer confident and proud, but high-pitched, panicked, and frantic. "Bianca, what the hell is this? What have you done?" I kept walking, taking slow, deliberate steps, allowing myself the tiniest, satisfied smile. He didn't realize it yet, but the envelope I had handed him was only the beginning. The beginning of my revenge, a plan I had been carefully crafting, meticulously plotting for months. I had always been the practical one in our marriage. While Gregory dreamed big, chased whims, and took wild risks, I kept our family grounded. I provided stability, structure, and security. I was the one who had saved for Amelia's education while Gregory had thrown money away on his friend's failing restaurant venture. I was the one who worked late nights, taking on extra hours as a finance manager at Trevanta Corporation, while Gregory, in the middle of a midlife crisis, quit a stable job to follow some fleeting passion for selling handcrafted furniture, a passion that lasted all of 6 months before he grew bored and restless again. And me? My own dreams, the ones I had quietly nurtured for decades, had always been on hold. I had long wanted to open a financial consultancy for women, to help them plan and protect their money, but I had postponed it. First, I told myself I would wait until Amelia graduated. Then, I would wait until Gregory found stability. I was always waiting. But 3 months ago, everything began to change. I noticed small discrepancies in our joint accounts. Tiny transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Nothing obvious to an untrained eye, but I had spent 20 years managing our family finances. I could spot the red flags immediately. I could have confronted him right then and there, but something held me back. Perhaps intuition. Perhaps the quiet realization that the distance between us had grown over the past year. Instead, I began investigating quietly. And what I found was far worse than I had imagined. Gregory had been systematically moving funds into a secret account for over a year. He had been taking Cassandra to expensive restaurants, buying jewelry, and even looking at beachfront properties, all while lecturing me about tightening our belts for retirement. And then, I discovered the text messages on his unlocked phone, messages about their plans for the day after Amelia's graduation, the day he had chosen to announce his freedom from our marriage. Messages filled with excitement about their new life together, about finally breaking free, about living without me. What Gregory didn't realize, or perhaps had never truly understood, was that I had been a financial professional for 30 years. I knew how money moved, how to trace assets, and how to uncover hidden accounts. I also remembered the prenuptial agreement we had signed 28 years ago, an agreement he had insisted on, claiming it would protect his future earnings. Ironically, it also included a fidelity clause, a clause that I now knew would be his undoing. While Gregory plotted his escape, I was quietly building my case. I consulted with attorneys, gathered evidence, and carefully documented every detail of his secret life, every financial move, and every betrayal. I didn't act out of anger. I acted out of precision, patience, and determination. Every step I took was calculated, every decision deliberate. I had spent decades supporting him, putting his dreams ahead of my own. But now, for the first time, I was putting myself first. And the satisfaction I felt walking through that humid Augusta air, leaving him to his panic, was just the beginning. The rest, the part he would never see coming, was already in motion. I had documented every hidden transfer, every suspicious withdrawal, every secret purchase. I gathered solid evidence of their affair, text messages, receipts, and pictures. I prepared the divorce papers carefully, making sure every detail was correct, every clause airtight. I timed everything perfectly, knowing Gregory would want to wait until after Amelia's graduation to avoid ruining her big day. But what he didn't expect was that I would serve the divorce papers the morning of the graduation, before his planned dramatic announcement. Of course, the papers were safely hidden in court records he couldn't access yet, so Gregory had no idea that I was always 3 steps ahead. I didn't go back to the restaurant. Instead, I drove home to our spacious colonial house in Augusta's historic district, the one we had bought 15 years ago, the one Gregory had already promised to Cassandra according to the text messages he thought I hadn't seen. I parked in the driveway and stepped inside, moving through what had once been our shared life. Everything looked exactly the same. The family photos on the walls, the antique grandfather clock that had belonged to my father, the worn leather couch where Gregory and I had once dreamed of our future. But in reality, everything had changed. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and opened the closet. As I had expected, Gregory's clothes were already packed neatly in suitcases, hidden in the back, ready for his planned departure tomorrow. I smiled to myself. He had always been meticulous about clothing, but careless about the truly important things. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends at the restaurant, from Amelia, even from Gregory's sister, Diana, who had flown in for the graduation. I ignored most of them, responding only to Amelia. "I'm okay. This isn't your burden to carry. Enjoy your graduation day. We'll talk tonight. I love you." I had protected Amelia from the truth for months, refusing to overshadow her final semester with our family drama. She might be angry at me for keeping secrets, but I knew she would understand in time. Amelia had inherited my practicality and her father's charisma, a combination that had helped her graduate with honors, with her head held high despite all the chaos around her. 3 hours later, I heard Gregory's car in the driveway. The front door slammed open with a loud bang. "Bianca," he shouted, his voice echoing through the house, raw with anger. "Where are you?" I was sitting in the living room, calmly reviewing documents on my laptop. The room felt quiet, deliberate, my sanctuary. I closed the laptop slowly as he stormed in, his face red and twisted with fury. In his hand, he clutched the envelope, the one I had given him at the graduation, the first step of a plan he had no idea was already complete. He froze for a moment when he saw me sitting there, composed, calm, entirely in control. The air between us was thick with tension. He had expected chaos, tears, maybe even a desperate apology. Instead, he found none of that. Only me, sitting calmly, the storm already on my side. "What is the meaning of this?" Gregory demanded, waving the papers like they were a weapon. His face was red, and his hands shook slightly as he held the divorce papers in front of him. "You served me with divorce papers today, of all days." I looked at him calmly, my voice steady and even. "I thought it actually aligned nicely with your plans," I said. "You wanted to start your new life. I'm simply helping facilitate the transition." "You had no right to do this," he snapped. "I had every right," I interrupted. "Just as you had every right to choose Cassandra. We all make choices, Gregory. Life is full of choices, and we live with the consequences." Gregory's face twisted into a smug smile. "The prenup expired years ago," he said. "Any lawyer will tell you that." I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. "Actually, it didn't," I replied. Section 12 specifically states that the fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the marriage. Your lawyer should have explained that to you. Oh, wait. You didn't consult one, did you? I could see the color drain from his face as the reality of his situation finally sank in. The prenuptial agreement he had insisted on, the one he had believed would protect his potential wealth, was now his undoing. Everything he thought he could take for granted, our house, the vacation property in Savannah, his portion of our retirement accounts, was now at risk. The grand announcement he had made at the restaurant, the one he had imagined would mark the beginning of his new life, had just turned into the most expensive mistake of his life. "You can't do this to me," Gregory said, collapsing onto the couch, his voice almost a whisper now, tinged with desperation. "We built this life together, and you chose to end it." "I am ending it," I said calmly, "but not in the way you planned." His phone buzzed in his pocket over and over. I could see him glance at it, then push it aside. Cassandra was probably wondering where he was, why he wasn't following their carefully orchestrated plan. "You've always been calculating, Bianca. But this is cold," he said, trying a different approach, his voice pleading now. "What about our history? 28 years together, doesn't that mean anything?" I studied him quietly. This was the man I had loved for nearly 3 decades. The man who had held my hand through 2 miscarriages before we had Amelia. The man who had once surprised me with a weekend trip to Charleston for our 10th anniversary. When had he changed? Or had he always been this person, and I had been too devoted to notice? "Our history means everything to me," I said, my voice steady and soft, but with iron underneath. "It always will. But love doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't erase the choices we make or the promises we break. I honored our marriage every day. You chose to betray it. And now you will face the consequences." Gregory sat in stunned silence, the papers crumpled in his hand, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. I could feel the power of years of careful planning, patience, and precision settling over the room. For the first time, I realized I was no longer afraid. I had finally turned the tables, and this time, the outcome was entirely in my hands. "That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply," Gregory said, his voice softening for a moment. He looked at me with something like regret, or maybe it was just an attempt to find a crack in my armor. Maybe we can fix this. I made a mistake. People make mistakes." "This wasn't a mistake, Gregory," I said firmly. "This was a calculated plan, one I've been carrying out for more than a year. You didn't just make a choice on a whim. You systematically moved our money. You looked at property with her. You plan to announce our separation publicly, to humiliate me in front of everyone. His face hardened again, and he tried to dismiss me. You're exaggerating. Am I? I asked calmly. I picked up my phone, opened the recording app, and played the first clip. His own voice filled the room. After the graduation, I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. Then Cassandra's voice, laughing lightly. And she has no idea about the money. Gregory's voice again.
None.
Bianca trusts me completely. That's her weakness. The blood drained from his face. You recorded our conversations, he whispered, disbelief and fear mingling in his voice. That's illegal. Not in Georgia, when one party consents, I replied, keeping my tone calm. And certainly not when it's in your own home. I didn't record your private moments with Cassandra. I'm not cruel. I only recorded the conversations about your plans to defraud me and betray our family. Gregory stood suddenly, pacing, agitated. I need to make some calls, he muttered. Of course, I said smoothly. Your attorney might be a good start. I'll be staying at Diana's tonight, I added, almost casually. Diana's? He sputtered, confusion and panic flashing across his face. My sister's house, I said. I nodded, letting the words hang in the air. She's quite upset with you, actually. She was the one who first spotted you and Cassandra together last Christmas. She didn't tell me immediately. She confronted you herself. You promised her it was nothing, that you would end it. When she realized you hadn't, she came to me. Gregory staggered back slightly, stunned. This was another blow he hadn't anticipated. Diana and I had always been close, but he never imagined his own sister would choose my side. Everyone's betraying me, he muttered, almost to himself. Ironic, isn't it? I said softly, gathering my purse and a small overnight bag I had packed earlier. You have until tomorrow evening to remove your things from this house. I continued, my voice calm but firm. After that, the locks will be changed. I turned toward the door, already walking with measured, confident steps. Behind me, Gregory called out, desperation creeping into his voice. Bianca, wait. You can't. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time, I felt completely in control of my life, my family, and my future. Every careful decision, every piece of evidence, every painstakingly crafted plan had led to this moment. And now, he would face the consequences of his betrayal, while I finally reclaimed everything that was rightfully mine. What about Amelia? Have you thought about how this affects her? Gregory's voice trembled slightly, almost desperate, as he tried to find one last angle to get to me. I paused, letting the anger that had been simmering beneath my calm exterior finally break through. Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield, Gregory, I said sharply. You certainly weren't thinking about her when you were planning your beachfront life with Cassandra. That wasn't about her. It was about you. His phone buzzed again, and this time he actually looked at it, groaning in frustration. Problem? I asked innocently. Cassandra is at the apartment already. She's moved her things in. I couldn't help but smile. The apartment you put in both your names? The lease you signed last month. Gregory nodded, confusion spreading across his face. You might want to check with the leasing office, I said. That application was flagged for credit issues and never completed. The agent even called our home to verify information. And guess who handled it personally?
Me.
I walked out the door, leaving Gregory to face the first of many consequences. His carefully planned new life was unraveling faster than he could process, and there was nothing he could do about it. I drove across town to Diana's house, a charming little bungalow near the university where she taught literature. She greeted me with a fierce hug the moment I arrived. I just heard from Amelia, she said, pulling me inside. Are you okay? I'm better than I expected, I admitted, following her into the kitchen where a bottle of wine was already open. I never thought Gregory would make such a spectacle, Diana said, pouring 2 glasses. The restaurant in front of everyone. He's lost his mind. It was meant to humiliate me, I explained, accepting the glass she handed me. A public rejection. If I'd reacted, I would have looked hysterical. That was the plan. Diana's face darkened. My brother always did have a flair for drama, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. We settled into her sunroom, a cozy space filled with potted plants, soft sunlight, and overflowing bookshelves. Diana had never married, choosing independence and her academic pursuits instead, and over the years I had sometimes envied her freedom. "What did you put in that envelope that made him so upset?" she asked, curiosity mixing with concern. I explained everything. The divorce filing, the evidence of his financial deception, and, most importantly, the prenuptial agreement that would leave him with far less than he had ever planned. "The prenup?" Diana said, amusement and disbelief in her voice. "I remember when he insisted on it. Father had just given him that money for his first business, and he was so worried about protecting it." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "And now? Oh, he really thought he could get away with it. He didn't count on you being this precise." I smiled faintly, raising my glass. Years of planning, Diana. Patience. And knowing exactly how he thinks. That's all it took. Diana nodded, her expression a mix of admiration and relief. "You've handled this better than anyone could have imagined. I just hope Amelia sees it the same way someday." I looked out the sunroom window, thinking of my daughter, and knew she would. Amelia had inherited my practicality along with her father's charm, a combination that had carried her through years of hard work and now her graduation. She would understand eventually, and when she did, she would be proud of the woman I had become. The woman who refused to be humiliated or taken advantage of, who had reclaimed control over her life. The irony was delicious. My phone rang, and I saw Amelia's name flash across the screen. I took a deep, steadying breath before answering. "Mom," she said immediately, her voice strained and trembling. "I'm coming over to Aunt Diana's." "Honey, you don't have to," I began. "I'm already on my way," she interrupted, her tone urgent. "Dad is telling everyone that you've lost your mind, that you've been planning this for months. He's saying horrible things about you." Of course he was. Gregory had always been the master of twisting the story, recasting himself as the victim no matter the situation. "Let him talk," I said softly. "The truth will come out soon enough." About 20 minutes later, Amelia arrived. She was still wearing her graduation dress, the one she had carefully chosen for this day, but her makeup was smudged from crying. She ran into my arms, burying her face in my shoulder, just like she used to as a little girl after a nightmare. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice muffled against me. "I didn't want to ruin your final semester," I explained gently. "You've worked so hard for this day. It was your moment." She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Well, Dad took care of ruining it anyway," she muttered. We moved to Diana's living room, a cozy space filled with sunlight, books, and soft furniture. It felt safe, a small refuge from the chaos Gregory had tried to create. Amelia sat next to me as I told her the full story, how I had discovered the affair, uncovered the financial deceptions, and learned of the plans Gregory and Cassandra had made behind our backs. "I knew something was off with Dad," Amelia admitted quietly. "He's been different, distracted, always on his phone. But I never imagined it would be like this. None of us want to see these things in people we love," Diana said gently, placing a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. My phone buzzed again, and I saw a message from Philip Anderson, my attorney. The emergency filing had been approved. The accounts I had identified were frozen, pending the divorce proceedings. Gregory now had only limited access to funds, enough for basic living expenses, but nowhere near enough to follow through on the property purchases he had planned with Cassandra. I showed the message to Diana and Amelia. "Good," Amelia said firmly, her loyalty to me shining through. "He deserves it." Her support warmed me, but I had to remain realistic. "He's still your father," I reminded her gently. "Your relationship with him is separate from what's happening between us." Amelia shook her head, a mix of frustration and disbelief in her eyes. "Maybe someday, but right now, I can't even look at him." He hugged me this morning, told me how proud he was, all while planning to blow up our family just hours later. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, cutting through the quiet tension in the room. Diana went to answer it and returned moments later with a troubled expression. "It's Gregory," she said, her voice tight. "And he's not alone." I steel myself as Diana led Gregory and Cassandra into the living room. Cassandra looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape route. She was 37, not exactly a trophy wife, but still 17 years younger than me, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a kind of confidence that only comes from never having faced real hardship. Gregory, on the other hand, looked furious. His earlier desperation had hardened into pure anger. "Bianca, you need to stop this insanity," he demanded, his voice rising. "Unfreeze the accounts. We can discuss this like reasonable adults." Amelia stood up, moving slightly in front of me, as if to shield me from him. "Maybe you should have tried being reasonable before announcing to everyone that you were leaving, Mom," she said firmly, her eyes blazing. Gregory's eyes widened, as if he had only just noticed our daughter's presence. "Amelia, this doesn't involve you," he said quickly, trying to dismiss her. "Doesn't involve me?" Amelia echoed incredulously. "You blew up our family on my graduation day, and it doesn't involve me?" Her voice shook, but her stance was steady. Cassandra reached out and touched Gregory's arm lightly. "Greg, maybe we should go," she suggested, a hint of nervousness in her voice. But he shook her off.
"No.
"I'm not leaving until Bianca agrees to be rational about this." Diana folded her arms, her expression sharp and unwavering. "My sister-in-law seems to be the only rational person here," she said coolly. "You're the one who created this mess, Gregory." I remained seated, calm and collected, watching the drama unfold. For years, I had been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts, kept everyone happy, and carried the weight of maintaining appearances. That role had exhausted me, and I had finally set it down. "The accounts will remain frozen until the preliminary hearing," I said steadily. "That's in 3 days. The judge will determine the appropriate division of assets at that time." 3 days? Gregory sputtered, disbelief written across his face. "What am I supposed to do for 3 days?" "You have your personal account," I reminded him, my voice calm and deliberate. "The one you've been funneling money into for the past year. That should be sufficient." Cassandra's head whipped toward Gregory. "You have a separate account? With how much in it?" It was becoming clear that Gregory hadn't been entirely honest with Cassandra either. He ignored her question, glaring at me. "This is vindictive, Bianca. This isn't like you." "Perhaps you never really knew me," I replied evenly. "Just as I apparently never really knew you." Amelia turned to Cassandra, her voice sharp and demanding. "Did you know he was going to announce it like that at my graduation celebration?" Cassandra looked down, shame coloring her face. "I thought he was going to talk to your mother privately," she admitted quietly. "The announcement today was unexpected." Gregory shot her a look of betrayal. Cracks were already forming in what had seemed like their united front. "I think you both should leave," Diana said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the room.
Now.
"You've upset Amelia enough for one day, Amelia," Gregory pleaded, his voice tight with frustration. "You understand that relationships change, don't you? Sometimes people grow apart." My daughter's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. Her voice was steady, sharp, and filled with conviction. "What I understand," she said, "is that you're a coward who couldn't even give Mom the dignity of a private conversation. What I understand is that you were stealing from our family while I was working 2 jobs to pay for my textbooks because you said money was tight." Gregory paled, his mouth opening and closing. "That's not how it was," he stammered. "It's exactly how it was." Amelia cut him off, her tone final and unwavering. "Please leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now." The silence that followed was deafening. You could almost hear the air in the room thicken with tension. Finally, Gregory turned toward the door, Cassandra trailing behind him like a hesitant shadow. At the door, he paused and looked back at me, his face tight with fury. "This isn't over, Bianca." "I'll fight you on this," he said, a promise and a threat rolled into one. I met his gaze steadily, my voice calm but resolute. "You're welcome to try." After they left, Amelia collapsed onto the sofa next to me, her tears flowing freely. "I've never talked to Dad like that," she admitted between sobs. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "Sometimes standing up for what's right is painful," I whispered. Diana came in with 2 fresh glasses of wine, placing one carefully in my hand. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. Indeed, I thought. This ending was just the beginning of something new. 3 days later, the preliminary hearing took place on a rainy Tuesday morning. I arrived with my attorney, Philip, while Gregory showed up with a lawyer he had hastily retained, a young associate from a corporate law firm, someone clearly inexperienced in family matters. His poor choice of representation was yet another consequence of his rushed, careless planning. The courtroom was small and austere. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics, reviewed the prenuptial agreement carefully. "This document appears to be in order," she said, looking over her reading glasses at Gregory's lawyer. "Do you contest its validity?" The young lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, we believe the agreement has expired due to the length of time that has passed." The judge raised an eyebrow. Section 18 clearly states that the duration is for the term of the marriage, plus any legal proceedings resulting from its dissolution, she read aloud slowly. "There is no expiration date indicated." Gregory leaned forward, whispering urgently to his lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The evidence of systematic fund transfers appears to violate the financial disclosure requirements outlined in Section 23. She shuffled through the papers and then looked up sharply. "I am ruling to maintain the freeze on joint accounts pending full financial discovery. Mr. Caldwell's personal account will remain accessible to him. The family home will remain in Mrs. Caldwell's possession during proceedings, as stipulated in the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause." Gregory's face flushed a dark red. "This is outrageous," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. The judge fixed him with a stern look. "Mr. Caldwell, I suggest you review the agreement you signed more carefully. This court will reconvene in 30 days for the full hearing after discovery is complete." As we left the courtroom, Gregory caught up to me in the hallway. "Bianca, please. We need to talk about this reasonably. 28 years together has to count for something." "It counted for everything," I replied quietly, my eyes meeting his. "Until you decided it didn't." I walked away, leaving Gregory standing alone in the courthouse corridor. For the first time, I saw the weight of his choices beginning to sink in. His carefully built world, the life he had spent decades constructing, was starting to collapse around him. Word spread quickly through our social circle. Friends called almost daily. Some offered their support, checking to see if I was okay. Others called simply for gossip, eager to hear every detail of the divorce drama. I maintained my composure, speaking with calm dignity. "Gregory and I are separating." "These things happen," I said, refusing to get drawn into long explanations or arguments. Meanwhile, Gregory's carefully constructed image was crumbling. The man who had cultivated the persona of a successful businessman and devoted family man was now exposed. His lies, his exaggerations, and his hidden financial maneuvers were out in the open. The freeze on the joint accounts meant he couldn't go through with any of the extravagant promises he had made to Cassandra. The beachfront property they had been dreaming about?
Gone.
The luxury car he had put a deposit on? Cancelled. His elaborate plans had been reduced to rubble. 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing, Diana called me, a note of amusement in her voice. "Have you heard the latest?" she asked. "Tell me," I said, smiling. "Cassandra moved out. Already?" I wasn't entirely surprised, but the speed of it was impressive. Apparently, she had discovered that Gregory's business wasn't as successful as he had claimed. Those substantial savings he always bragged about? They didn't exist. Cassandra told her friend Jennifer that she hadn't signed up to date a man with financial problems. I couldn't help but laugh. Gregory had always been good at creating illusions. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life. Thanks to the financial security I had maintained separately from our joint accounts, I had freedom Gregory hadn't anticipated. I rented a small office downtown and began setting up the financial consultancy I had dreamed about for years. My first clients were two women going through divorces of their own. Word of mouth quickly brought in more. I specialized in helping women understand their finances during major life transitions, divorces, widowhood, career changes. The work was immediately fulfilling in a way my corporate job had never been. Amelia, who had accepted a position with a marketing firm in Charleston, called regularly. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she said after I described my growing client list. "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me years ago," I replied. "I'm preparing women for whatever might come. Being needed for my expertise rather than my caregiving is empowering and new for me." The final divorce hearing was scheduled on what would have been our 29th anniversary, a fitting close to a chapter that had lasted nearly 3 decades. Gregory arrived looking haggard, the weight of his mistakes written all over his face. I later learned that Gregory's business was struggling without the financial support and guidance I had provided for years. Cassandra was long gone, already dating a real estate developer from Savannah. Most of our mutual friends had quietly distanced themselves from him after discovering the full story of his deception. The judge upheld the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Gregory left with only his personal belongings, his struggling business, and the money in his private account, which, after paying his attorney's fees, was barely enough to rent a small apartment. Meanwhile, I retained our home, my retirement accounts, and 70% of our joint investments, just as the prenuptial agreement stipulated in cases of infidelity. The irony was almost poetic. The very document he had insisted upon to protect himself had become the instrument of his downfall. As we left the courtroom, Gregory approached me one last time. His shoulders slumped, and his eyes avoided mine. "I made a terrible mistake," he said quietly. "Is there any chance we could?" "No," I interrupted, gentle but firm. "That door is closed." "I understand," he replied softly. And for once, I truly believed that he did. "I hope you find happiness, Bianca. You deserve it." It was perhaps the first honest thing he had said to me in years. 6 months later, my consultancy, Caldwell Financial Transitions, was thriving. I had moved from the small office downtown to a larger space and had hired 2 associates to help manage the growing client list. I specialized in helping women secure their financial futures, particularly during major life changes, divorces, career shifts, widowhood, or any moment when stability felt uncertain. Amelia visited often, eager to see what I had built. During one visit, she smiled and said, "You know what's ironic? If Dad had just been honest from the beginning, he might have kept half of everything." "Sometimes people can't see beyond what they want in the moment," I replied, smiling at her wisdom. The woman who had once defined herself solely as Gregory's wife and Amelia's mother had discovered a new identity: mentor, business owner, and advocate. The envelope I had handed Gregory at the restaurant hadn't just been my escape plan. It had been the key to a door I hadn't known existed. Behind that door, I found not just revenge, but reinvention. In securing my financial future, I had also reclaimed something far more valuable: myself. The freedom, the confidence, and the sense of self I had long suppressed were finally mine. For the first time in decades, I could shape my life on my own terms, and the possibilities stretched endlessly before me. Life had shifted, dramatically and irrevocably, and I was ready to embrace every new beginning it offered. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm, one I controlled entirely. Caldwell Financial Transitions had grown beyond my expectations. The small consultancy I had started with a single office and 2 clients had expanded into a bustling firm with a full team. I had hired 2 more associates and a part-time assistant, all of whom shared my mission: helping women navigate financial transitions, big and small. Every day brought new challenges and new victories. I spent mornings in client meetings, reviewing budgets, investments, and retirement plans, and afternoons mentoring women who felt lost or overwhelmed. They came to me scared, unsure of how to manage the changes life had thrown at them. By the time they left, Their shoulders were straighter, their eyes brighter, and their confidence restored. Sometimes, I caught myself smiling at the thought that the advice I had longed to receive myself was now something I could give to others. Amelia's visits became a cherished routine. She called almost daily, sharing stories from her marketing firm, asking for advice on financial decisions, and celebrating the little wins, like securing a new client or finally paying off a lingering debt. "Mom, you've built something incredible," she said one evening over dinner at my apartment. "You've turned a terrible situation into a life that's so much bigger than Dad could ever have imagined." I laughed, taking a sip of wine. "It's not just about the money," I said. "It's about reclaiming yourself. That's the true reward." On weekends, Amelia and I explored Charleston or Augusta, sometimes for fun, sometimes for business. We attended networking events together, her confident charm opening doors for me that I hadn't imagined possible. We laughed, we planned, and slowly, the shadow of Gregory's betrayal faded further into the past. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself standing outside a new office building downtown. The firm had expanded enough that we needed a larger space, and this modern, sun-filled office was perfect. I ran my hand along the glass doors, feeling a sense of pride that was entirely my own. For the first time, I realized how far I had come, not just financially but emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. I was no longer just a wife or a mother defined by someone else's choices. I was me, fully, unapologetically, and entirely free. The day I officially closed the last chapter with Gregory, I felt lighter than I had in decades. He had moved on, as had I, though our paths would never cross again. I sometimes wondered if he truly understood what he had lost, not just the wealth, not just the house or investments, but the respect, the trust, and the dignity of the woman he once claimed to love. But I didn't dwell on that. My life was full of forward motion now. I mentored young women in finance, volunteered for local women's shelters, and spent time helping those who needed guidance in ways I wished I had been guided years ago. My story became my strength, a testament to resilience, intelligence, and courage. Amelia, too, thrived. Watching her grow into a woman with confidence, compassion, and a sharp mind reminded me daily why every hard decision had been worth it. She no longer feared standing up to the world, nor did I. Together, we had rebuilt our lives, layer by layer, brick by brick, stronger than before. One evening, I sat alone in my office, reviewing client files, when I looked out the window at the city lights of Augusta stretching into the night. I felt a deep sense of calm. The envelope I had once handed Gregory at that restaurant, so full of strategy and quiet defiance, had not only changed the course of my life, it had unlocked a door I didn't even know existed. Behind it, I found not only justice, but reinvention, purpose, and the freedom to finally live for myself. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. Life was no longer about surviving the mistakes of others. It was about embracing my own strength, shaping my own future, and stepping boldly into a life I had earned. Every setback, every betrayal, every sleepless night had led me here, to a place where I was whole, powerful, and unstoppable. The past was behind me. The future was mine. And for the first time in a lifetime, I was truly, completely free. In the months that followed, life became a careful balance of work, family, and personal growth. Caldwell Financial Transitions had outgrown the downtown office, and we had moved into a sunlit space on the corner of a busy street, the walls lined with shelves of books, files, and personal notes from clients. I hired 2 more associates, women with the same vision, to help others navigate the chaos of sudden life changes with confidence and clarity. Every morning, I arrived early, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and reviewed client plans, sometimes consulting with Amelia, who was eager to learn from my experiences. She asked questions about investments, tax planning, and retirement options, and I realized I was not just teaching her about money. I was teaching her how to think strategically about life. It became a bonding ritual between us. The firm's reputation grew quickly. Women recommended us to their friends, and soon I was receiving calls from professionals and retirees alike. One client, a woman going through a bitter divorce, arrived in tears, clutching her paperwork. By the time she left, she had a clear plan, a sense of empowerment, and a small smile that made every sleepless night I had endured in planning Gregory's downfall feel worth it. Amelia's life was thriving alongside mine. She had been promoted twice at her marketing firm in Charleston, and she often traveled for work, returning home with stories of her adventures and challenges. She was blossoming into a confident young woman who knew her worth, partly because she had witnessed her mother reclaim her life. On weekends, we explored galleries, cafes, and historical sites, sharing conversations about ambition, relationships, and financial independence. She was no longer just my daughter. She had become my confidant and partner in building our new world. One Friday evening, after a particularly long week of client consultations, I hosted a small networking dinner for women entrepreneurs in my office. The room was warm with chatter, laughter, and the hum of new ideas forming. Amelia joined me, introducing herself to clients as my mom's business partner in spirit. I watched her interact with confidence and charm, a stark contrast to the shy, uncertain girl I had once helped through school projects and late-night homework sessions. It wasn't always easy. There were days when I doubted myself, nights when I questioned whether I had done the right thing in standing so firmly against Gregory. But each time a client left with renewed hope, each time Amelia smiled with pride at her own accomplishments, I felt a quiet, steady affirmation. I had built something meaningful from the rubble of betrayal. During this period, I also allowed myself small joys I had long neglected. Early morning runs along the river, quiet afternoons reading by the window, and occasional solo trips to Charleston to visit Amelia and immerse myself in the city's energy. I was learning that freedom was not just financial independence. It was the ability to make choices purely for myself, without compromise or fear. By the end of the year, Caldwell Financial Transitions had grown into a fully functional firm with a loyal client base. We were hosting workshops on budgeting, retirement planning, and estate management. I even started a mentorship program for young women entering the financial field, passing on the knowledge I had accumulated over decades. Watching these women gain confidence reminded me of my own journey, from a wife and mother defined by others to a woman defining her own life. Amelia and I often sat together in the evenings, reviewing client success stories or planning future seminars. One night, she turned to me with a smile. "Mom, I never imagined life could be like this. You've built something amazing, and I feel like I'm part of it." I hugged her, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "This isn't just my success," I said. "It's ours. We rebuilt our world, and we get to shape it every single day." Looking out the office window at the city lights, I realized something profound. The life I now lived was richer, more meaningful, and more powerful than anything I had imagined during my years of sacrifice. The challenges, the betrayal, the pain, they had all been stepping stones leading me here. And as I watched Amelia laugh with one of our new clients, I knew this was only the beginning. The envelope I had once handed Gregory had opened a door I hadn't even known existed. Beyond it, I discovered not only freedom and reinvention, but the profound joy of creating a life fully, unapologetically my own. I was no longer defined by the past. I was the architect of my future, the guide for others navigating theirs, and the mother of a daughter who had learned that strength, integrity, and courage could shape a life far beyond what anyone else dictated. The story of betrayal had ended, but the story of empowerment, growth, and new beginnings was just beginning, and I was ready for every chapter. The following year was transformative. My consultancy, Caldwell Financial Transitions, had not only grown in clients but also in reputation. We were no longer just a small office downtown. We had moved into a larger space with a dedicated training room, conference area, and a cozy lounge where clients could feel at ease discussing their finances. I had hired 3 more associates, all women passionate about helping others, and together we created a system that provided workshops, one-on-one consultations, and online resources for women navigating financial transitions. Every day brought new stories. I helped a single mother save her home after her husband walked out, guided a young widow through managing her late husband's estate, and coached women starting their own businesses to understand budgeting, investment, and taxes. Their gratitude and visible relief reminded me why I had started this journey, not for revenge, not for validation, but to make a real difference in people's lives. Amelia flourished alongside me. She had been promoted again at her marketing firm and was traveling more for work, bringing back insights and ideas she eagerly shared with me. Often, we would sit in the office lounge with a cup of tea or coffee, brainstorming strategies for clients or planning future workshops. She had grown into a confident, insightful young woman, and it thrilled me to see that my example of independence and resilience had left a mark on her. I also allowed myself to embrace life outside of work in ways I never had. I joined a local women's book club, attended art exhibits, and even took a short solo trip to Charleston to enjoy the city without the weight of responsibility for others. Each experience reminded me that life was not just about rebuilding what had been lost. It was about discovering the joys I had never given myself permission to pursue. The firm began hosting public seminars, and I was invited to speak at conferences across the state about financial literacy for women. It was fulfilling in a way I hadn't imagined. My knowledge and experience could empower women to take control of their lives, to make choices they might once have feared. Every applause, every thank you note, every story of someone finally feeling in control of their finances was a reminder that my years of patience, skill, and resilience had culminated in something greater than I could have imagined. Amelia and I began volunteering together, teaching free workshops at local libraries and community centers. Seeing her naturally connect with clients and attendees reminded me that strength, empathy, and intelligence were traits I had nurtured in her, not just for her success, but for her ability to face life with courage. Even in my personal life, I started to notice small shifts. I allowed myself to make choices simply because they made me happy. I redecorated the office, painted a sunlit mural in the lounge, and bought a small weekend cabin by the river where Amelia and I could escape the city noise. I began keeping a journal, documenting each success, each challenge, and each lesson learned along the way. By the end of the year, Caldwell Financial Transitions had expanded to a staff of 10, serving dozens of clients monthly and maintaining a waiting list for consultations. I had launched an online program for women across the country, sharing insights and strategies to navigate finances during major life changes. One evening, Amelia and I sat on the porch of my river cabin, watching the sun dip behind the trees. She leaned against me, smiling. "Mom," she said softly, "you've done more than just survive this past year. You've built a life that inspires everyone around you, including me." I hugged her, feeling a sense of peace and pride I had never known. "We've built it together, Amelia," I said. "And it's only the beginning." I realized then that the envelope I had once handed Gregory, so simple, so quiet, had opened a door not just to freedom or revenge, but to a life I had never dared to imagine. Every step I had taken, every challenge I had faced, had led me here. I was independent, respected, fulfilled, and free, not just from Gregory but from the limitations I had once accepted. Life was no longer about surviving the past. It was about embracing every possibility of the future, shaping it with purpose, passion, and courage. And as the river reflected the golden sunset, I knew that this new chapter, our chapter, was ours to write, limitless and filled with hope, success, and the kind of joy that only comes when you finally reclaim yourself. 3 years had passed since the tumultuous events with Gregory, and the transformation in my life was profound. Caldwell Financial Transitions had evolved from a modest local consultancy into a recognized firm known for empowering women to take control of their finances. We now had 2 offices, one downtown for high-profile clients and one in a quieter part of Augusta for community programs and workshops. My team had grown to 15 dedicated associates, each trained not only in financial planning but in empathy, mentoring, and supporting women through life's biggest transitions. Our programs expanded as well. I launched online courses that reached women across the country, teaching practical skills for budgeting, investing, and planning for life after divorce, widowhood, or career changes. The response was overwhelming. Emails flooded in, stories of struggles and triumphs, requests for personalized advice, and expressions of gratitude that warmed me in ways money never could. For the first time, I fully understood the ripple effect of empowering others. Amelia had blossomed alongside me. At 25, she had become a rising star at her marketing firm in Charleston, leading campaigns for major clients while maintaining her own freelance projects. She often visited me on weekends, sharing both professional successes and personal reflections. "Mom," she said one afternoon as we walked along the riverbank near my cabin, "watching you build your business and reclaim your life, it's taught me that no setback is permanent and no person has the power to define my worth." I hugged her tightly, proud not just of her career, but of the strong, principled woman she had become. Over the years, I allowed myself to explore personal passions that I had long ignored. I took a painting class at a local art studio, discovering a creative side I had forgotten existed. I traveled to Europe for a month-long cultural immersion, visiting cities I had always dreamed of seeing, documenting the journey through sketches and journals. I even tried kayaking, hiking, and weekend retreats focused on mindfulness. These small adventures reinforced the truth I had learned. Life was meant to be fully lived, not merely endured. Gregory's shadow faded gradually. While news of him occasionally reached me through mutual acquaintances, it was clear that his life had not recovered the way he had imagined. Cassandra had long moved on, and he was struggling to maintain his business without the support and guidance he had once taken for granted. The financial consequences of his decisions had caught up with him, and yet I felt no bitterness, only a quiet affirmation that integrity and preparation were far more powerful than deceit and arrogance. I also became deeply involved in mentorship programs for young women entering the financial industry. Seeing their confidence grow under my guidance reminded me of my own journey, the sacrifices I had made, the lessons I had learned, and the strength I had cultivated over decades. I realized that my greatest legacy might not be my financial success alone, but the way I had inspired and guided others to stand tall, take risks wisely, and embrace their worth. One summer evening, Amelia and I hosted a dinner for several clients, colleagues, and friends at the cabin by the river. The table was full of laughter, storytelling, and shared wisdom. Watching these women exchange ideas, encourage each other, and celebrate their progress was profoundly moving. I looked at Amelia, who had arranged the seating and led some of the conversations, and realized that she was carrying forward the values I had instilled: strength, independence, and resilience, while adding her own unique voice. In the quiet moments, when the guests had gone and the sun had dipped below the horizon, I would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far I had come. I thought of the envelope I had handed Gregory years ago, not as a symbol of vengeance, but as the catalyst for transformation. That single act had unlocked doors I hadn't known existed, guiding me to financial independence, personal freedom, and the fulfillment of my lifelong ambitions. By the 5th year, my consultancy had become a model for women's financial empowerment programs nationwide. I was invited to speak at conferences, write articles for major publications, and collaborate with other organizations dedicated to supporting women. Amelia had moved into her own apartment in Charleston, thriving professionally and personally, yet she remained closely connected, visiting often and sharing in the joy of building something meaningful together. I had also opened a scholarship in my mother's name for young women pursuing careers in finance, ensuring that my experiences, lessons, and advocacy would continue to benefit future generations. The joy of giving back, of creating opportunities for others, became as rewarding as any professional success. Looking back, I realized that the years of betrayal, heartbreak, and struggle had not broken me. They had shaped me. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable than I had ever imagined. Life was no longer about reacting to the mistakes of others. It was about creating, growing, and thriving on my own terms. The woman who once lived defined by duty and compromise had transformed into a mentor, a business leader, a traveler, an artist, and above all, a mother who had guided her daughter into her own power. The past had been a catalyst, but the future, vivid, expansive, and full of possibility, was entirely mine. As I watched the river glow under the setting sun, Amelia beside me, I felt a profound sense of peace and pride. The journey had been long, the lessons sometimes painful, but the life we had built together was far richer than any fantasy I had once imagined. And in that moment, I understood the most important truth of all. Real freedom, real power, and real happiness are born not from revenge, but from reclaiming your life and embracing every possibility the future holds.